gotta get in front of my deal. I used to sit there. Towards this the last time. But you know, the city clerk actually sat down here. So I guess we were all kind of shifting.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, call the meeting to order. Start with roll call.
Commissioner Allen?
Present.
Commissioner Norwood?
Here.
Commissioner Sirigusa?
Here.
Commissioner Roberts? Here. Commissioner Stallings?
Here.
Commissioner Orr?
Here.
Mayor Hankinen?
Here.
All present.
Okay, thank you. Item number 2, at the Commissioner's request, discuss any item of concern on the rescheduled regular session agenda. Okay. Seeing none, we'll go to item 3, study items. 3.1, update on efforts to improve water quality in Southern Heights Edition.
Yeah, I'll kick that one off. Morali's going to go over some stuff we've done, but I want to talk about here a month or so ago, we had some people come to the meeting and talk about poor quality water, discolored water, rusty water. David's also here to talk about that. I feel good that we took some action, I think, fairly quickly, and I hope that you can feel good about that. So we want to talk a little bit about what we have done immediately with the water flusher. And either you or David's going to talk about that. And then David, I know you've got some results of water sampling that I think is good, shows the water's safe to drink. Anyway, but we've got some long-term water plans that's in the budget this year that I think you're going to talk about right now, right, Morales?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. Like George said, we are working on improving the fire flows and water quality in the Southern Heights. That's our main objective of this project. The location of the improvements are right here. Harriet Road on the north, railroad track on the west side, 7th Street on the east, and Steel Avenue on the south side. So that is the area of interest we are working on, improving the water quality and the fire flows. Just give you some history behind. Back in 80s, CDBG spent a lot of money to improve fire flows and water quality in this neighborhood. So about half of the area that we described that's been replaced or added new lines in 1980s. So, and I can give you some reference on the project numbers and the years right there. So currently, what we are working on is adding a main trunk line to provide fire flows to meet current standards. The main trunk line goes from Garriott and 4th Street, goes along Leona Mitchell and come back, turn on France Street and come back here and tie back into Steel Avenue. So that's the trunk line. Based on our current models, we are looking around from 12 inch to 10 inch on the main line. And a portion of the line right at the south end, that is about 8 inch or 10 inch. The reason the variation is we wanted to balance fire flows and water age. The demand in that area is very low, so we cannot put the bigger lines. At the same time, we have to balance the fire flows, so we have to work on both sides of the equation. Beside the fire trunk line, we are also working on improving some of the side streets. Back in the 80s, when they added a new line, they left the old line as in place, and some of the services are in old line, some of the lines are in 80s line. So as part of these improvements, we are eliminating some parallel lines, so the water age can be rectified in that areas. And also we are adding some loop lines, so part of the improvements. The next steps, finalizing the plans. We are working, bidding the project in fall. Construction starts in November, winter. So, got any questions?
What do you estimate it would cost? Have you done that for us?
Preliminary, so we had a budget about $1.5 million, sir. The total length of the project is about 1.2 miles. So
Total length of line?
total length of line.
Moralia, we're designing it in-house, is that right?
Yes, we are designing.
So about how far, maybe you already said, how far along are we? Are we 25%, 50%?
We
Still
are,
figuring it
I
out?
would say 60 to 70% now.
Oh, okay, great.
I wanted to introduce our new team member to the engineering. She's been with the city, Brooks. She's working on this project heavily, and she's doing the modeling and also designing the project. So, welcome.
Did you want to come up and tell us all about it?
I think he covered it pretty well.
Hey, Morali, are we, I know we're replacing the main lines going down Leona Mitchell and over to Steele.
Yes.
What about some of the interior lines on the residential, in the streets?
That's where we are analyzing, like some of the 80s lines are fairly good. So we are exploring, digging and exploring, make sure if the 1980 lines are good. So we are going to transfer the lines to the 80s and abandoning the old lines. So at the end of the project, you will see a decent 5 flows and water quality.
Okay.
And we are also analyzing putting in new services, because some of the services are copper lines. So we are going to take those copper lines out and put in poly lines. So part of this project.
Okay.
So we estimated about 200 services in that area. So we are analyzing all the aspects of it.
Okay, because I know that Forgotten Ministries here in the near future, they plan on the tiny homes, and that was one of the things that really brought the need to light. So that would give them the water that they need as well to be able to do that project too. So that's great. Thank you, City of Enid, Gerald, everyone,
City staff.
the city staff, everyone, the people in the area. Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot for everything that you all are doing.
I did have a chance to reach out to Ray Graves and Rose Carr yesterday and told them about the meeting, so they may come at some point tonight. Ray thought maybe the water was better, couldn't really tell, but was really excited about the road. And I don't know that Rose had seen much of a difference, but David, do you want to come up and talk about the flusher and how we think it will help with the discoloration issues and the water? And tell them about the water sampling.
Yeah, so we added a flusher at the end of York, right where it turns, going up to North, and we're going to actually set that to flush twice a week. I don't know what the actual volume setting is, but that should resolve any of the issues that we're having with water rage or anything like that. We did test the water initially and didn't have anything that looked out of sorts, but we also sent it down to the state for a test in lead and copper, which was a concern on all the water lines. And the copper came back at about 15 times lower than the action limit, and the lead was non-detect. So there was no lead that was actually detected in the line. And actually, when we cut the coupon in the pipe to connect the flusher and actually kind of did an examination of the interior of the pipe, we saw a really good result of what the material looked like, which was very promising for us, which told us the water stability and quality inside of the pipe is essentially really good. It's not essentially attacking the pipe and trying to degrade it. And on the other side of it, it's not causing all the metals and everything to precipitate on the inside of the pipe. So we are, for all intents and purposes, in a really good spot from a water stability standpoint. Once we get the upgrades with the water age, I think we'll be in a really good place. But I feel real good about essentially the water quality from a public health standpoint. And we are reaching out to not just Southern Heights, but a bunch of different areas around town to increase our sampling to kind of cover these areas that I think in the past have not been covered historically. Questions?
When you took that first sample, what was the chlorine residual?
Chlorine residual was 0.34, I think it was.
So if I met the specification?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay.
0.2. Yeah, it looks from what when we initially open up the pipe, And this is just because of where it was at the bottom of the line. We opened up and let it ran, and in that case, a lot of sediment came out. I mean, it did not look like good water, and I understand why, because it was a dead-end line downhill that didn't have the uses that met the criteria of the pipe. But when we started sampling it, every time I've been out there, it has had good chlorophyll.
So it wasn't very pretty water, but from a health standpoint, it was still okay.
Yeah, yeah. And the two criteria that you're going to use for drinking water, obviously you want it to be healthy, but then you do want it to be aesthetically pleasing one way or another. And so it didn't meet the look standard. And I think the flushers definitely alleviate that problem. And we will be checking it. There is a sample port at the bottom of the flusher, so we're already going to start scheduling to, on a regular basis, sample that, so we can have a good idea of what's going on in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 3.2, discuss proposed ordinance change regarding recall procedures.
Mayor and Commissioners, okay, so, oftentimes, well, we have put editor notes in the charter before. If you look through the charter, you will notice that there are lots of editor notes. That's usually done by my office. So I thought I would go through those as well. We already had the editor note about a recall election for commissioner versus a recall election for mayor. One would be a ward election and the other would be citywide. I've added the two notes about clap saddle and the time frames, that we can't call an election within 30 to 40 days. And then, in addition, there is another section, petitions and filing fees, and state law does not require filing fees or petitions for municipal elections, and based on there isn't a case law that indicates that this it doesn't, I can't find a case that says that this has been abrogated, but everything else has been abrogated, and the county won't accept the filing petitions or the filing fees, the county election board. So I'm putting, it's not required. State law doesn't require it, and and they do our elections and they say that they can't take it. So that's why I put that editor note on there. Okay.
Carol, can we get our money back?
Well, you were supposed to get your money back.
Did you get your money back?
Well, I just made a joke of it. I said, I want money back. But they were in transition during that time between executive directors or whatever you call
Okay.
that person.
Yes, you can get your money
So
back.
I never did go ask for $100.
I actually think that, the people that got elected this time.
Stole my money.
They got their money back. Okay, we'll figure it out. I don't know where the money is, but I'll check on that. Okay, so,
He got his money back.
I never did.
okay, so, what I've done with the ordinance is to attempt to clarify based on our only recall election attempt. And so I have taken, what I did was the state Supreme Court said, okay, use the state law. So I have, as much as possible, put in on 163 exactly what they should do, which was was pretty much, what in this first one is what they did, which is that they make a little pamphlet, they have a space, and they have the people sign up, and they have grounds and charges. And then the next one is what I was wrong about. I did not think that the felony in the state statute that said it was a felony to sign an initiative petition or a referendum, I didn't think that, based on the ruling that criminal statutes are strictly enforced, that if it didn't say recall, it didn't apply to recalls. Well, we are wrong. It now applies to recall, so I have provided that it is a felony for someone to sign a recall petition. Now, just to make sure, since it actually still doesn't say recall petition, I've put pursuant to Benazell versus Alyssa Lack and the statute, because it's kind of a gloss of the Oklahoma Supreme Court. Okay, then the verification was also difficult. So we've got the verification, and I've taken the verification, which is put in the state statutes for initiative and referendum state questions. And we have put in the information that you have to be at least 18 to collect signatures, that the signatures need to be signed in their presence. And this is language not from our charter but from state law, that each have stated their name, mailing address, date of birth associated with his or her Oklahoma voter registration record, and each signer is a legal voter. And then I put in the other language from our charter that says, I further state that the grounds and charges are true, and I believe that each signature on the pamphlet is the genuine signature of the persons whose name it is purported to be. That's from state law. They sign it. Okay. Timing of recall elections. I could put, it would be about a page. I could put all the different possibilities for holding a recall election, because it depends on whether there has been a special election. There are special rules for special elections called by the governor. Then there are general elections that are called by the city for our same time as our normal elections for officers. And then there are the other elections that have a different time frame if a federal election is at the same time as the election we're calling. All of those have different time frames. None of them are 30 to 40 days. They're all more than that. So I'm just saying that's impossible, and we'll call the election when we can based on all of that. But if you would like, I can put in the specifics about the special elections, the general elections, the federal elections. The reason why I didn't was because they've been changing all of those every couple years. So if we put in the specifics, then we have to change the ordinance every particular years. But ordinance changing, easy compared to changing the charter. I know some people ask, yes.
Well, that was the only question I had about this entire thing, was that we are bound by state rules on when we can have elections, and this recall thing under 166 was that it gave us 30 to 40 days, and I thought that's not enough time.
Right.
On the whole,
Right.
on the most part.
Right.
Now,
It used to be.
for us to do that. So I don't see any reason why you need all that extra language in there,
Okay.
because that would mean we'd have to change it every single time, and it doesn't come up very often.
Right.
And if we
It
got
doesn't come
trapped
up.
by something,
It doesn't come up very often, and I would hope that the city clerk and the city attorney, if somebody was contemplating a recall, would provide advice to them and tell them, under these circumstances, because of that, I mean.
Well, it does provide,
Yeah,
it still provides that the clerk is to put it on the next agenda.
right.
And that you're supposed to assist in in getting the next possibility. So those are still okay. It's just this window of 30 and 40 days. Now, a long time ago, when it was paper ballots and the city did it themselves, it was a different story.
Yeah.
If our charter has been amended to say that we're going to use the election board, we don't have to, but they're the ones with the machines, and no one, now, we have very low turnout. So it wouldn't take that much for us to count the paper ballots, but we would have to have all of our own sites. It would be crazy.
That's why we pay them to conduct these elections.
Exactly. And, yes. And, I don't know why the state keeps limiting the times. More and more that cities can hold elections, but, they have, and we're a subdivision. Okay. Any thoughts? You
Sure.
want me to change anything?
No, I just have a question on 164, where it speaks about the felonies of a signature.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that one part of that is if someone forges, like I said, a signature. Then another part, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this right. If a signature is signed or someone signs that petition more than once, is that a felony act as well? Or not?
Okay. If a person signs a name other than their own, absolutely felony, they're saying. Then if they knowingly sign their name more than once for the measure. So for instance, there is knowingly there. So if the person is maybe maybe suffering from dementia or something, I doubt that the district attorney, if the person is 93 and didn't realize, knowingly is, but for most of us, we need to be careful about only signing once. Okay, or to sign such petition when he is not a legal voter. Now that's an interesting one, because of course people sometimes are not as familiar with their ward, they may get confused and stuff. Now, just because it says this on a warning, I'm not sure that, this is gonna be the #1 district attorney thing, is to go out and because obviously the clerk will know if they are a legal voter and if they are voting for Ward 1. And I do not think that this requires us to turn in 92-year-old persons or someone who if they were living across the street would be in Ward 6. I think, but by golly, we have to have this felony warning on there, so that's why we have it. I don't think that, on innocent mistakes will be prosecuted, but who knows? It's outside of our power. It's a judicial fiat.
Joe, do you know when the last time someone was recalled before this last meeting?
There hasn't been a successful recall, since I've been in town, since 1988. And I do not know whether there ever has been a recall. I have not gone through, like the laserfish, but I am unaware of a recall.
Okay. Thanks, Carol. All right. Item 3.3, financial update. All right, what we've been waiting for, right?
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Tonight, on our financial update, there are 3 topics we're going to cover. We're going to go first of all over the Call Lake Water Supply Program, that overall budget, where we stand. Then we're going to move on and talk about the ARPA Act, or the American Rescue Plan Act, and the implications for the city and how that works. And then we're going to finish up with where we're at on the budget so far year to date. So we're going to kick off with CAW. Overall, you can see that the total updated budget on the program is $332.8 million. So far to date, we've committed $327 million of that, and we have $5.8 million available of the overall budget still to bring under contract. At the end of phase 2, we did go ahead and decide to move forward with the project, and you can see the total of phases 3 and 4 make up the $317.5 million budget for construction that we've been talking about since we completed that 30% design review. Okay. Then we have here the total commitments of that $327 million that we have committed to date. We've paid $58.68 million out to various vendors on the project. We've completely paid all of phase 1 and 2, and we still have $268 million encumbered to vendors at current. Collections. We started collecting sales tax on this project in March of 2017. From March of 2017 through the end of August, we've collected $39.27 million in Call Lake sales tax. That was 0.75% through May of 18, and then went up to 1% after that. Over that same time, we've earned $367,000 in interest on those funds. Of those funds, this is how those funds have been spent to date. We've paid a little over $2 million in professional services. This is on all the loans. This is for our bond counsel, our financial advisor, any closing costs on those loan documents were paid out of these sales tax instead of being drawn down from the funding. There's also been 9%, 15, 3, and 4 for the respective loans drawn down on loan payments since those have been taken out, and we have $21.5 million available in that account today. As of the end of this month, we'll have interest and principal payments due, and the total of those payments for this month is $6.76 million. So those will be moving over into the loans, and we'll add the 2020 OWR SRF loan. We've had our first drawdown, and so we do have an interest payment due on that this month for the first time. And this is overall where we stand on all of our loan statuses. You can see the first loan that we took out for the phase 2 engineering has been fully drawn down, including all the interest earned on it. The 2018 FAP we're drawing on currently. A lot of the design and Garver expenses are coming out of that, as well as land acquisition and easement costs. The 2008 SRF loan is also Garver expenditures that have been drawn down. We have $3.4 million left on that one to draw down. The 2019 FAP loan has not had anything drawn down on it yet. As we finish up the 2018 FAP, then we'll move on to the 2019. It's earned almost $1 million in interest over the time that we've held the funds though. And the 2020 SRF loan, we've done one drawdown, and that is only for the initial bonds and insurance to get Garney on board. We're still working through the process with Garney on all of their reporting and requirements so that we can meet all the federal requirements. So that we can get additional drawdowns processed against that loan. So it's a big process. There's a lot of subcontractors and contractors and city staff and finance and just a lot of different moving parts. So we're all getting on the same page to get that lined out, and then we'll start seeing those come through to get the drawdowns. You can see the total balance here is $334 million that we have available for the program, and the program budget on the first slide was only $332. We had originally anticipated drawing down the closing fees against these loans, which we still can do if we would like, but if we don't need the whole $334, we'll just draw down $2 million less on the SRF loan, and then we won't have to pay interest on that since they are drawdown loans. Are there any questions on Call Lake and the funding and the funds for that before we move on to the American Rescue Plan Act? All right. The American Rescue Plan Act was signed into law on March 11, 2021. included in the act was a $350 billion included to fund state, local, territorial, and tribal governments. From then until May the 10th, the U.S. Department of Treasury was working on what does that mean for everybody, and on May the 10th, they came out with a fact sheet and a final interim rule that created the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. It was a 151-page document. It was a lot of information. I tried to boil it down here to just the top. There's basically two categories that everything fell into. The category one, things that you could claim against it are mainly related to COVID, the health, and specifically to fighting the health part of that. When we move on here to category two, it opens it up and there's a lot more things that could be used on there. A lot of it to unemployment, household assistance, a lot of the things that you saw on the first round of CARES Act funding. But they did also add some other things in here that weren't included on the first one. Premium pays, addressing revenue loss for local municipalities, and investments in infrastructure. Also on May 10th, when they opened up or brought this fact sheet and final interim rule to us, they opened up a portal on the Treasury website to be able to claim these funds from the U.S. Department of the Treasury. On May 24th, the City of Enid applied, went through all the steps, lots and lots of steps, dozens of steps to authenticate everything, get everything in that needed to be turned in so that we could be eligible to receive the funds. Fast forward a little bit later, mid-June, the U.S. Department of Treasury released the compliance and reporting guidance documents, and it really narrowed down and narrowed into what specifically local governments can spend this money on. And basically, these 4 bullet points are what we can spend. These are eligible expenses on the state and local recovery. So to respond to the COVID pandemic or COVID-19 public health emergency, so the same thing, hand sanitizers, masks, anything that we need like that to keep people safe. To respond to workers performing essential work during COVID-19, so if there's anything that they needed to do for cleaning and things of that nature where they're helping the public, or police or fire in their responses to people, things there. And then there was also the provision to help provide funding for lost revenue from prior years. It was a very specific formula, and we'll go through kind of how that affected the city. And then they've narrowed down that investments in infrastructure to specifically water, sewer, and broadband, because those are areas, when we're talking about public health, that are the areas that those funds can be used. It specifically says, no, you can't use it for roads. And it specifically says it in there, so I'm just gonna throw that out there now, because that's not a choice. But one of the other things it did was it broke out the groups of local governments into 4 types. And so there are populations that are over 250,000, and then the populations that are under 250, but more than $5 million in funding was allocated to them. Metros that are under 250 in population but receive less than $5 million, and then everybody else falls into non-entitled units. And that's important for how you get funding, what your reporting requirements are, and everything going forward from here, so you know what you're required to do. And the city of Enid fell into the group of metro under 250 in population, and we are receiving more than $5 million in state and local fiscal recovery funds. One of the things that they really focused on with SLRF was getting direct funding to governments. And in the CARES Funding Act, there were only 37 metro areas that received direct funding from the U.S. Department of Treasury. The rest of it went through the state. This time they opened that up a lot more. There are around 700 communities that are getting direct funding from the U.S. Department of Treasury, and we are one of those this time. Overall, for all local cities, towns, and villages, it's 36 $65.1 billion that is being distributed to about 19,000 cities, towns, and villages across the U.S. Oklahoma, 554 million, is coming to the state of Oklahoma for those entities. And on the listing, there are 10 direct funded cities up here listed with the calculation. Enid is on this list, and we have a commitment of 11.8548,984. So $11.8 million in funds from the state and local fiscal recovery funds. There's 10 cities that got that direct funding in Oklahoma. The other 570 cities are non-entitlement units, so they're going through the state of Oklahoma and have different requirements than we do for getting their funding. Like I said, we submitted all the requests on May the 24th to submit to get set up. We agreed to all the terms and conditions, went through the Civil Rights Act form, went through the funding requirements. You cannot have funding received in excess of 75% of your general fund budget based on your pre-COVID budget, which ours does not. And as of June the 7th, we received the first half of our money, which is $5.927 million. And we will receive the other half of our funding 1 year later in June of 2022. They came out with reporting requirements and the online submission portal on August the 9th of this year. On August the 11th, we attended a technical assistance webinar put on by the Treasury and kind of learned what our requirements were going to be for this funding. We had an initial interim report due August the 31st. As of August 31st, we had not spent any funds, so that part of it was pretty simple, but we did also have to complete a revenue loss calculation. It's very specific on timeframes and how you do it, and there's big long formulas, but in the end, our base year was our fiscal year 2019, and then everything going forward from there has to be on a calendar year basis. So our calendar year 2020, we showed a revenue loss of $1.326 million. All of that is attributable to the Enid Event Center Fund, not having the events at the event center, and then also hotel tax. And so I would anticipate as we look going forward to do 2021 that I think we'll still have an overall reduction. I'm not sure what amount that will be yet in that same fund.
So our sales tax didn't really show a reduction?
No. Going forward after this, October 31st and every quarter thereafter, we have to do a report showing what expenditures and what projects we're doing with this money. And all costs must be incurred for this project. Can't go back further than March 4th of 2021, but all the funds have to be committed by December 31st, 2024. Proposed uses of the funds at this time that have been discussed is the revenue loss replacement, of course, for the event center. And we can claim that all the way going through December of 2024. If it continues to show a loss, we can claim the funds back to help offset that. The rest of it, some proposals that we have are to do some investments in infrastructure, specifically with water and fiber. We're looking at doing a fiber optics project to bring city administration and the service center on fiber. Right now, we do not have that option. That's something that we would like to expand to help our capabilities and connectivity between the two locations. The other two projects that are on here are ones that you're going to be familiar with. We talked about during the budget process. Actually, the $1.5 million from Leona Mitchell water line, you just heard an update tonight on. It is in the current budget. We put it in the budget anticipating we may be able to spend these ARPA funds to help offset the deficit that is in the EMA this year's budget. The EMA has a budgeted deficit of $7 million this year. And if we were to bring this 1.5 plus $1 million from the Ames water line that's down below, That would offset that deficit to 4.5. So we'd be drawing down 2.5 less of our fund balance in EMA if we were to allocate these projects to there. The Ames raw water transmission main is an $8 million project that was submitted by engineering during our budgeting process. And it's to tie in the well fields with the new Cold Lake water line. There is $1 million in the budget this year to do some engineering, and I'm not sure what all else with that. NEPA, okay. And then it's anticipated that we bring back the rest of that after it's designed so that we can fund it. And these are some projects that we think are good fit for all of the terms and conditions that are required as part of the ARPA money. But of course, the ultimate say-so is up to you guys on how we spend these dollars. These are just proposals that we're bringing forward that we think are good fits for the funding. If we have questions on ARPA, I'd be glad to
So
try and answer them for you.
Are you suggesting we bring you pet projects that you might fund? I said that in jest, okay.
There are a lot of requirements on these, and I will say the subrecipients, especially if we were to pass on any of these funds to other organizations, is very onerous. There are a lot of requirements on what has to happen with those federal dollars.
When you do they come and do your annual audit, is this one of the areas they're probably gonna dig into?
Yes, this will be, anytime we have any federal grant awards over $750,000, which is pretty much every year for the city of Enid, they will go and do uniform grant guidance on all of that documentation.
Could you give me a simple, how much did we receive prior to this last amount that it's gonna come in two pieces? What did we receive prior to that? I got
The
confused.
CARES money,
Yeah, I got confused.
About $4 million.
Yeah, I was gonna say 3.8, 3.9, that was the CARES funding, and
Okay.
then now we're getting 11 additional, so
I picked up.
14 on.
So we're gonna be at around $15 million total, if you get it all.
Yes.
Yeah.
How much is the deficit for, if you didn't have that money, and you, are we losing money during this time frame?
The revenue loss portion of it, that $1.3 million would be revenue
Yeah.
loss, but
Okay.
other than that,
No?
no.
Okay, so what's a gain essentially for us?
Yes.
Infrastructure.
A one-time gain, yes, that'd be great to spend on infrastructure if we can.
It's just not roads, right?
Not roads.
We
It
spend it on water.
specifically
we
says
spend
not
it on
roads.
That was
Other
very
questions?
That was helpful, thank you for doing that.
We'll have more discussions like this before. Obviously, you guys are gonna be the ones that give us the guidance on how to do this. So this was kind of the first update. Aaron's really gotten into it, and so I guess we did our first report. So we know, and we're gonna be responsible, sounds like the federal government, but I'm sure the
Yes.
state will be looking at it, our auditors will be looking at it.
Federal government, yeah. All right.
Okay.
Anything else on the ARPA before we move on to the budget?
Thank you for what your staff and you do, and
Absolutely.
keeping track of all this stuff.
It's a lot. We want to make sure we're in compliance.
And you put it in a
everything's taken care of.
format that's easy to understand, thank you.
Good. Update on the budget, we're not too far in yet, so there wasn't a whole lot to analyze, so just high level, we're gonna talk about overall revenues. Most of these numbers are July and August, but for sales tax, I went ahead and included September since we received those funds last week. So far for sales use tobacco tax across all of our funds, we've collected 661,000 more than what we budgeted for those first 3 months. So we're 6.56% up over budget in those areas. There are a few other lines that are both up and down. When we talk about licenses, are about 15% lower. It's due to really just delay in renewals. We have a new software that just came into play in December, and so we're learning and working out some of those bugs to do those renewals. Those will come along, I'm not concerned. It's just a delay in the timing of those renewals for those licenses.
Aaron, you might also let them know some of these fees are much smaller sources of revenue in comparison with our sales tax.
Yes, we're talking about $17,000 when we're talking about where we're at compared to where we should be at this time. So we're lagging $17,000 in licenses I think we'll make it up. It's just a timing delay. Permits, same thing. We're really slow in July this year compared to the last couple of years, but it's picked up again in August and September. And again, we're only talking about $11,000 when we talk about 10% lower. Cable franchise fees, this one is $54,000. This, we did not receive a payment in August, so we will begin following up with them on the receivables that are due on that account. Mowing and cleaning is 27% lower, which amounts to about $14,000. A lot of that is due to, we're just slower on pace this season. Typically we have 300 to 400 liens that are filed, and we're really only on pace to have about 200 filed this year. So it means people are mowing the lawn, so that makes us happy. Jet fuel sales were up about 78,000 higher than where we should be, or where we were anticipating being through 2 months. So that's a good problem to have. And again, you'll see on the next slide that falls over to the expense to replenish that jet fuel. Hotel tax collections actually are up 5%, $60,000 higher. Last July, they were significant. It was only about $90,000 in collections, and this year it was $195,000 in July. About 6 or 7 of that thousand of that was due to some back taxes being paid by hotel. But other than that, we're seeing maybe a little pickup starting now in some of the hotel room revenue. And then transit grants is just, again, timing, just getting that pushed through the system. Transit has both CARES fund and regular funding that they're using, so it's taking a little longer to draw those funds and get them over. So again, just timing, not of concern at this point, but we will follow up on that.
Can I ask a question about the cable franchise fee? You said that we just missed the August payment, or we didn't get it and we're wondering why?
Right, we have not received it yet, and we will follow up with why we have not received it.
That's a good idea.
Yes.
They seem to forget a lot of things sometimes.
Yeah, and so that happens, and then they'll catch up and we'll get 2 months worth of payments in 1 month. It happens, it's just
Okay.
following up and making sure that it doesn't get skipped. Yeah.
Would you refresh me on the downtown hotel calculation and when that kicks in and how that all works?
Yes. You wanna
Go
say
ahead,
it?
Eric. I believe from memory, it's based on an annual calculation. We'll take the total number of rooms available, which are 96, times however many days there are in the year. If there are some rooms that are out of service because of maintenance issues, or some of those wouldn't be included in the calculation. So I think the earliest that we'd be looking at whether we need to make a payment or not would be sometime, he opened in April. So I'm thinking if it's based on an annual basis, we'd be looking at April. And so, but we can take a look at that and maybe give you a better
So it'd be a
update.
year before we have to
Yes,
write
yes.
a
Yes.
check to them if we have to write a
Yes.
check.
And even if we have to, I have not asked him to start submitting occupancy reports. I know he'll be happy to do it, so I'll do that soon so we can start monitoring that. I've seen just an up and down thing, and I've talked to a different hotel person today. He told me that hotels around town are up and down, so they were in the lower occupancy. We had a really high occupancy in June. I think you guys saw that report because of Coke stuff, but we'll try to give you a better idea of what might be coming. I also know that formula contemplates, it's 5 years, but it contemplates if we ever had to pay in 1 year and they were better in a year, in a subsequent year, we have an opportunity to claw some of that back with the formula. So I think it was calculated, or it was done in a skillful way from the city's perspective to try and hopefully avoid ever having to pay on that. Or if we do, it's very favorable for the city.
Good answer.
Thanks, Cheryl. All right, and then over to the expenditure side after we reviewed everything again. Coming in over budget at this point, general fund sales tax transfers out, and that's because the sales tax is coming in higher, so the transfers out are associated with that. Other than that, we have some expenditures at airport, again, jet fuel purchases to replenish that higher sales than we expected. There's been some concrete approaches and parking lot repairs that were not planned for at the time that we prepared the budget. And then grant amendment for the crosswind runway project. We will bring back an appropriation for not only those engineering fees that you see there, the 220, but the entire project to award that whenever the design is done. And do an amendment to take care of everything at the airport at the time that we need additional appropriations. Other than that, everything else is on target, looks good. I have no concerns on the budget, where we're at through 2 months. Questions on the budget?
Good job, thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
All right. Item number 4, we are adjourned. We'll see everybody back here at 6:30.